No, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything because, to tell you the truth, I'm sick and tired of pretending that everything was wonderful when it wasn't perfectly perfect. I'm Abby and I'm 32 years old. Before you pass judgment on me, please just listen to what I have to say. Everyone believes that they are aware of what took place, but in reality, they are unaware of the facts. It is impossible for them to comprehend what it is like to be totally reliant on another person for each and every one of your requirements. There's no doubt that Travis made a respectable income from his trade employment. Yet, this does not imply that I felt like I had any independence. Whenever I required something, and I mean anything, I was required to inquire about it from him. Is it that I need new clothes? Inquire with Travis. Would you like to get my hair done? Inquire with Travis. Are you in need of fresh school supplies for our son Colton? Make sure that it is within the budget by first inquiring with Travis. Can you imagine how that would feel? To be a mature lady who needs to provide an explanation for purchasing a cup of coffee when you are out conducting errands. My decision to remain at home with Colton ever since he was born was meant to be a wonderful thing, right? On the other hand, nobody ever discusses how alienating it is. A method via which you entirely lose yourself. When Travis would get home from work, he would be exhausted and want to unwind, and I did get that. I really do. On the other hand, I had spent the entire day at home with an 8-year-old child, cleaning the same messes over and over again, preparing the same meals, and having the same conversations about duties and homework. In the event that I attempted to discuss my day with Travis, I observed that his eyes were glazed over. On the other hand, what was I going to say? Would you believe that I spent 20 minutes attempting to get Colton to put his shoes on the correct ones? The fact that I had to look up how to remove grape jelly from carpet once more on Google. When it was time for Colton to get new clothes for school, that was the worst part. Because children develop at such a rapid rate, his pants were getting too short. In response to my mention of it to Travis, he simply groaned and stated that we would have to wait until the next payment. Hold on, It was as if my child's appearance at school was a luxury expense, and I felt like I had no control over the situation at that very moment. There I am, a mother who is unable to even purchase clothing for her own child without first obtaining permission. At that point, I began to consider the possibility that there must be another approach. My good buddy Raven had been updating her Facebook page with updates regarding her new business venture by merely stating that she was finally making her own money and experiencing a sense of independence. She was intentionally being somewhat cryptic about the situation. I asked her about it in a private conversation, and she informed me that she had begun producing content for the internet. Nothing out of the ordinary, she stated. Nothing but photographs and videos that individuals pay to view. I came dangerously close to choking when she showed me her earnings from the previous month. Over the course of 4 weeks, she made more money than Travis did in a period of 2 months. The amount was greater than what I had seen in my bank account since before Colton was born. When I first heard about it, I thought it was too risky and too strange. But as time went on, I began to think about it differently. Would you agree that this was the modern world? At all times, people were able to make money online. People who have influence. Those who create things, the business owners. I don't see why I should be forced to remain in a housewife role from the 1950s, when there are other alternatives available to me. Raven elucidated the mechanism behind it. Real money can be made, you have complete control over everything, and you are able to establish your own boundaries, the ability to support oneself financially. The words kept playing over and over in my thoughts. Just snapping a few pictures while Colton was at school and Travis was at work was the beginning of my photography endeavors. Nothing out of the ordinary, just photographs that are attractive and excellent clothes. I convinced myself that it was similar to being a model, which is something that a lot of worthy women have done. Immediate action was taken in response. I was able to get subscribers in just 1 week, and by 2 weeks, I had generated more money than I had in the previous years combined. Money that is real, held in a bank account that is in my name. What a fantastic sensation it was. My first experience as a mother was when I realized that I was more than just Travis' wife or Colton's mother. This was the first time I felt like I existed. I was once again Abby, and people wanted to see me and pay attention to me. They wanted to see me. Everything I received at home was very different from the comments I received. These gentlemen recognized my efforts and took note whenever I experimented with my hairstyle or wore a different dress. They applauded my efforts. What was the most recent occasion on which Travis complimented me on something other than during dinner? I created my own bank account, which was something I hadn't done since being married to my husband. Although Travis often said that it was simpler to manage money together, the truth was that he was the one who managed the money, and I was the one who sought for permission to spend it. After years of holding my breath, Finally being able to breathe freely was like finally being able to breathe. As I received each deposit notification on my phone, I experienced an increase in self-assurance and a sense of autonomy. As soon as Travis began to notice that I was taking more photographs, I simply informed him that I was experimenting with photography as a hobby. I responded to his inquiry about new clothing by stating that I was selling some old things on the internet and using the money to go out and treat myself. In reality, they were not lies. I was taking photographs, I was earning money from content, and I was purchasing new stuff. I was simply avoiding giving him a comprehensive explanation because I was certain that he would not comprehend it. Travis adhered to conventional practices in ways that were effective for him, but I found them to be suffocating as the number of subscribers continued to increase, so did my self-assurance. These men were successful and recognized the value of beauty and femininity. They admired a woman who took care of herself and understood the importance of beauty and femininity. Not only did they not sigh whenever I indicated something that I required, but they also did not ask me to justify every purchase. My time and attention were something that they were willing to pay for. It was the confirmation that I hadn't realized I was craving until it was delivered to me. Some nights, after Travis had gone to sleep, I would lie there preparing my next piece of content, pondering ways in which I could expand my subscriber base, and daydreaming about what it would be like to be financially independent. Without consulting anybody else, I would be able to purchase whatever it was that Colton needed. It would not be a problem for me to get my hair done. This would allow me to make a contribution to our household rather than simply being an expense. More quickly than I had anticipated, the sum of money was growing. During the course of 2 months, I was able to save more money than we normally had in our emergency fund dot in a way that I hadn't experienced since before I became a mother. I could not help but feel proud of myself. Something was being constructed, something was being created, and I was earning something. It was not simply about shooting images in this situation, getting back my independence, and demonstrating that I could make a financial contribution to our family were the goals of this endeavor. It was not necessary for Travis to be aware of every single financial aspect of my business. Regularly, men divided their professional life into distinct compartments. No matter how many conversations he had with customers or how many decisions he made on the job site, he never shared any of them with me. My labor, my business, and my participation were all a part of this. I was finally able to pull my weight financially, and to tell you the truth, I felt proud of myself for that. I was sick and tired of being the one who was perpetually spending money rather than generating it, and I was weary of feeling like a burden. In response to Raven's recommendation that I improve my gear and take things more seriously, I did not experience any hesitation. At this point, it was no longer merely a hobby. A legitimate possibility for business was presented to me. At this point, I was an entrepreneur, and just like any other business owner, I needed to make investments in my own success. That Travis was unable to see it in that light was not a problem that I was responsible for solving. My material had developed by the 3rd month of the year. In all honesty, the cash was too excellent to ignore, not to mention the fact that subscribers were seeking more specific types of photographs. I upgraded my phone, purchased lighting that was designed for professional use, and began to approach this endeavor as the serious business that it had become. Upon Travis's observation of the new apparatus, I informed him that I had sold some jewelry that I had never worn and had made the decision to purchase more advanced photography equipment. It is correct in theory. Although I had been taking photographs, they were not of the landscapes that he most likely envisioned. I had never before encountered such a steady influx of financial resources. The fact that I was making more money than Travis for a few months was a fantastic feeling. With the exception of the fact that I was doing it on my own terms, I was finally contributing an equal amount to the finances of our home. I had no employer who told me what to do. I had no timetable that I had to adhere to, and no one else who controlled the amount of money I could make. This was a perfect example of running a business, and I was quite excellent at it. As time went on, Travis began to inquire further about my recently launched business idea. When did I start selling photographs? To what extent was I earning? Does he have access to my portfolio? Because, to tell you the truth, I did not owe him a thorough description of my job any more than he owed me a play-by-play of every interaction he had with clients. I dodged the most of his questions. Despite the fact that I was not receiving his feedback or approval, I was able to handle this situation quite fine. The attention that was provided by subscribers was, in the best possible way, addictive. Travis had ceased showing appreciation for effort many years ago, but these men showed it in a different way. At the moment that I experimented with a new hairstyle or purchased a new outfit, people noticed it right away. A compliment was given to me. They came to inquire about my day. They made me feel as like I was somebody who was worth their time and fascinating. When I entered the room at home, Travis hardly looked up from his phone half the time. He was concentrating on something else. My habit of staying up later, replying to messages, and planning content began to take shape. Having initiatives and objectives that were entirely personal to me was an amazing experience. I used to respond to Travis's inquiries about what I was doing on my phone at such a late hour by saying that I was simply reading through social media or chatting with my friends. He never made any attempts to obtain specifics, which was great with me. I was constructing something real here, something that provided me with a sense of purpose that went beyond simply taking care of children and handling home chores. A buddy of mine named Viva began making remarks about how I appeared to be different and more distracted, as well as how I was constantly on my phone today, despite the fact that she continued to grumble about her part-time job, which barely covered her vehicle payment. I could see that she was probably envious of the fact that I had found something profitable. The opinions that people have about you might shift, and not usually in a positive way, as you achieve success. It seemed as though even my closest friends were uneasy about my newly acquired self-assurance and independence in terms of finances. The best aspect was that I was able to spend my own money without having to justify my purchases. It is possible for me to purchase new clothing for Colton without first reviewing the budget, because I didn't feel guilty about getting my nails done. I did it. It is possible for me to make a contribution to the cost of the household and still have money left over for myself. It was then that I realized what it was like to be financially independent, and I questioned why I had waited so long to pursue it. When I noticed that certain pieces of my content were receiving more attention than others, I began to pay attention to the topics that received the most responses from my subscribers. It was common sense used in business. Providing clients with what they desire will result in their paying higher rates for it. The higher the level of exclusivity and personalization of the content, the more people were willing to pay for it. On the internet, I was not engaging in any activities that a large number of other women were not. Just like the modern market, I was able to capitalize on this situation because I was smart enough to do so. However, despite the fact that Travis appeared to be growing increasingly agitated by my phone usage and my recent purchases, I was growing tired of this pessimism. I was finally able to make a financial contribution to our family, and I built a profitable business from nothing. However, rather than being proud of me, he was being critical of the way I spent my time. It seems as though he would rather have me dependent and struggling than autonomous and prosperous. Both the number of subscribers and my income continued to increase over time. I was putting the money back into the company that I had started. More sophisticated gear, more elegant attire, and the rare professional photograph. Just about every lawful proprietor of a company would act in the same manner. There is no reason to believe that the fact that my business involves taking photographs of myself makes it any less legitimate than any other commercial activity. For the first time since I was in college, I began to have a sense of self-assurance. This was something that I was good at, I was successful at, and I was finally demonstrating that I could construct something of value on my own with my own resources. The validation was fantastic, and to tell you the truth, it made me realize how long I had been okay with the sensation that I was invisible and the fact that I was underappreciated at home. I was finally receiving what I deserved, which was something a lot better than that. That was the moment when everything shifted. During the early hours of a Tuesday, Travis returned home from work, and his entire energy level was different. It wasn't the normal, exhausted, and predictable version of him, in a manner that I had never witnessed before. He was irate. It would appear that one of his coworkers had shown him something on his phone, and Travis quickly recognized me as the person in question. Photographs of my stuff that were circulated throughout his office as if they were some kind of joke. The altercation provoked a violent reaction. Travis was yelling at me at the time, asking how I could possibly do this, what about our son, and what about the reputation of our family. The fact that I was degrading Colton, humiliating him, and humiliating our entire family was something that he kept saying. I attempted to explain to him that this was a genuine business, that I was finally making a financial contribution, that I was being entrepreneurial and modern, but he was not listening to any of it. His attitude, which made me feel as though I were some kind of criminal rather than a successful businesswoman, was another thing that really got to me. In spite of the fact that I was growing a thriving business from nothing and generating more money than he was for a number of months, he continued to act as if I was engaging in some dishonorable behavior. In a really usual manner, on the other hand, a woman is required to conform to a specific notion of acceptable employment, or else she is in some way in the wrong. A man is free to work any job he desires. I conveyed to him my thoughts in their entirety. It was not the year 1950. This was the modern world. Women were granted the right to become financially independent, to exercise control over their own bodies, and to establish their own companies. The difficulty that he needed to go through was whether or not he was too insecure and too traditional to handle the idea of having a successful wife. Despite the fact that I had spent years being financially reliant on him, I was not going to apologize for being self-sufficient and prosperous when he discovered that. I had a second bank account. The argument immediately became more heated. His behavior suggested that I had been concealing assets or something like, but in reality, all I was doing was shielding my company income from his authoritarian ideas regarding financial matters. Travis viewed it as a form of fraud rather than a sound business technique, despite the fact that any savvy business person would keep their household finances and business finances separate. He attempted to use Colton as leverage by stating that our son would be ashamed if other students at school discovered that I was being more selfish than I should have been. And to tell you the truth, Colton was only 8 years old. Kids at that age don't even comprehend the business activities that adults engage in. In addition, if other parents had issues with the way I made money, it was more indicative of their narrow-minded perspectives than it was of the decisions I made concerning my finances. It was my opinion that Travis needed to catch up with the times. At that time, this was the method by which individuals made money. I had a lot of experience in the content development industry, which was a respectable business. If he was unable to deal with having a wife who was accomplished and self-sufficient, then perhaps he should look into his own anxieties rather than trying to exert control over what I did with my life and my body. At the end of the conversation, I made it abundantly plain that I was not going to allow anyone to interfere with my business. I was finally able to find something that I was good at, something that allowed me to be financially independent and provided me a sense of personal fulfillment. Travis has the ability to change his expectations regarding the kind of bride he wants to be married to in the event that he is unable to accept that concept. The idea of my being a drain on the home finances and having to seek for permission for every purchase was not something I was going to do again. In the middle of the night, while I lay in bed, I reflected on how drastically my life had changed. I was totally reliant on Travis for everything when I was in his position 6 months ago. At this point, I was operating a prosperous business, earning my own money, and at long last experiencing a newfound sense of self-identity. If he was unable to recognize it as progress, and if he was unable to take pride in my accomplishments, then it is possible that he was not the supportive partner that I believed he was. Despite the fact that it was the best thing that had occurred to me in years, I was not going to allow his antiquated attitudes ruin his experience. This was my company, my money, and my choice, and although I had put in a lot of effort to develop it, I couldn't allow anyone to destroy it at this point. Following the initial altercation, Travis continued to advocate for couples counseling. He said that we needed to go through this together and that we required the assistance of a professional in order to survive as a married couple. But to tell you the truth, I was able to see right through it. He wanted a counselor to find a way to persuade me to give up my business and return to being financially dependent on him. It was important to him that I be told by someone in a position of authority that I was wrong for pursuing independence and success. I did not agree to go. No, this was not a problem with the relationship. It was Travis who was having problems with his control. I was not going to pay someone to listen to him moan about my legitimate business while they probably took his side because of their own outmoded notions about women and labor. I was not going to do that. When it came to the creation of content, counselors were just as likely to demonstrate judgmental behavior as anyone else. Travis' condition deteriorated rather than obtaining assistance. In front of Colton, he began to make a few remarks about how his mother was constantly on her phone and how she was more concerned with shooting pictures than she was with spending time with her family. The attempt to turn our son against me because he was unable to deal with my success was quite manipulative. When I tried to defend myself, I explained to Colton that my mother was working and that snapping pictures was my job, just like my father had a job. Additionally, Darla, who is Travis' sister, made the decision to pry into our sphere of influence. I received a phone call from her one afternoon, and she recommended that we get together for a cup of coffee to discuss the situation with Travis. I ought to have been aware that it was going to be a surprise attack. An hour was spent by her delivering a lecture to me about the importance of family values, the things that Colton need from his mother, and how I was destroying my marriage. For financial gain. At long last, I took a deep breath and told her precisely what I was thinking. She was a woman who was by herself and did not have any children. She had no concept what it was like to give up one's entire identity for the sake of one's family, only to be treated as if she were a financial burden. She was unable to comprehend what it was like to create something successful from nothing, to finally have your own money, and to be independent. Due to the fact that she had never been in my position, her opinion regarding my company was completely worthless. She brought up the topic of Colton's health, which caused the conversation to get heated. It seemed as though the fact that I had a prosperous business was somehow a reason for me to be a poor mother. In my conversation with her, I explained that being a parent who makes a financial contribution to the household makes me a better example for my kid to follow than being dependent on his father. In order for Colton to understand that his mother was more than simply someone who cleaned the home and begged for permission to buy food, he needed to see that she was capable and successful. I had reached the point where I was finished with Travis's family and their judgment by the time I left that coffee shop. They desired for me to remain in my position, to be the submissive housewife who never questioned Travis's authority over our financial situation. It was impossible for them to accept the fact that I was prosperous and independent because it posed a challenge to the conventional family dynamic that they had established. Although Travis began working longer hours, he claimed that he needed to pick up additional shifts. However, I was aware that he was avoiding coming home because he could not stand the sight of me becoming successful, and self-assured. What he liked best about me was that I was insecure and needy, constantly seeking his approval and acceptance. After I had established my own self-worth and established my own source of income, he was no longer able to effectively relate to me. The most upsetting aspect was the manner in which he began to approach my company as if it were some kind of humiliating hobby rather than the lucrative enterprise that it truly was. When the bills arrived, he would make comments about how my company ought to cover certain expenses because I was making so much money. However, when I attempted to discuss business investments or growth prospects, he would shut down and behave as if I was talking gibberish. Increasing the amount of time I spent with Raven and other women who grasped the concepts of business and independence occurred. That is the case. They had an understanding of what it was like to create something from nothing, to finally have control over one's own financial future. As I was surrounded by them, I became aware of how Travis had become less supportive of me and how he was becoming more threatened by my success rather than proud of it himself. My number of subscribers continued to increase, and I began investigating the possibility of forming collaborations with other content makers. I was engaging in genuine business networking, establishing professional connections that could contribute to the growth of my brand and the enhancement of my source of income. On the other hand, Travis interpreted it as me spending time with those individuals rather than concentrating on our family. When I was reinvesting the money, it was in a better position than it had ever been before. More advanced equipment, professional photographic sessions, and marketing tactics are also available. Despite the fact that I was taking this as the serious business that it had become, Travis was unable to get past his personal anxieties and acknowledge the success that I had achieved as an entrepreneur. When Colton began to experience difficulties at school, things reached a point of no return. His instructor said that he had been getting into confrontations with classmates, that he appeared distracted and agitated, and that he had been getting into fights. During our meeting with the school counselor, she mentioned that some of the students had been making fun of Colton because of something that they had read on the internet. Although my heart fell, I made an effort to remain cool. After some time had passed, I learned that some of the parents had, in some way, come across my stuff and that their children had begun expressing themselves to Colton. He has said some hurtful things about his mother. Not only was I angry with myself, but I was also angry with these parents who had a narrow sense of perspective and were training their children to bully and judge the families of other people. To put it another way, this was precisely the kind of mentality that I was attempting to rise beyond in my tiny town. I went to the school prepared to defend my family when they asked for a meeting with both of my parents during the school day. However, rather than showing his support for me, Travis remained mute as the principal and counselor made the suggestion that my company was the source of difficulties for Colton. They suggested that I ponder the possibility that my presence on the internet is influencing the social scenario that my son is experiencing at school. I was having a hard time believing what I was hearing. They were requesting that I alter my lawful business because they believed that other parents were not mature enough to educate their children the appropriate way to behave. In essence, they were requesting that I give up my ability to support myself financially due to the fact that some members of our community were judgmental and closed-minded. I conveyed to them my thoughts in their entirety. If parents were not teaching their children to respect other families and to mind their own business, then that was a problem with parenting, and not a problem with the work that I was doing. That people will always find reasons to judge and criticize was something that Colton needed to understand. And the best way to respond to this was to have confidence in the decisions that your family makes. The conference came to a close with me, making it quite plain that I would not be altering my business methods in order to satisfy the prejudices of other individuals. In the event that the school was unable to teach people's acceptable behavior and respect for diverse families, it is possible that we would need to seek other educational options for Colton. In the course of the trip home, Travis remained silent, and his silence felt more judgmental than any fight that we had previously engaged in. After we had arrived at our house, he finally burst. In addition to claiming that I was being self-centered and obstinate, he stated that I was putting my own business ahead of the welfare of our son. He made the accusation that I was more concerned with money and attention than I was with Colton's happiness and the development of his social skills. My resistance was strong. Rather of allowing him to cope with some transient mocking from children whose parents plainly had nothing better to do than gossip, I reminded him that teaching Colton to be ashamed of his mother's accomplishment would be much more detrimental to him than coping with the momentary teasing. By demonstrating to Colton that women are capable of being self-sufficient and successful, I was demonstrating that we do not have to accept the constraints that other people place on our life. In the event that I did not stop, Travis threatened to take action, which caused the conflict to escalate. The topics that he discussed were child custody, divorce, and safeguarding Colton from the repercussions of my determinations. It was hard for me to accept that he was threatening to dismantle our family because he was unable to deal with the challenge of having a wife who was successful and independent. At that moment, I became aware of how bad this situation had gotten. The fact that Travis disapproved of my business was not the only thing he was doing. He was actively working against me, attempting to use our son as leverage to dictate the decisions I made. He was willing to destroy our marriage rather than encourage my achievement and independence. He was willing to do this. I informed him that he was free to leave at any time if he desired to do so. On the other hand, I was not going to allow myself to be tricked into giving up the most beneficial thing that had ever occurred to me while I was working. Had constructed something that was genuine and successful, and I was not going to allow his fear and inability to control it to destroy it. While I was lying in bed that night, I couldn't help but reflect on how much our friendship had evolved. Travis was able to provide comfort for me when I was reliant and having difficulty. Nevertheless, as soon as I achieved success and became self-sufficient, he was unable to deal with it. That provided me with all of the information that I required to understand the kind of the partner he actually was. I was genuinely taken aback when Travis really carried out the threats that he had made. His divorce petition was filed, and he immediately began his battle to gain custody of Colton in its entirety. It was hard for me to believe that he was willing to force our family to fall apart, simply because he was unable to acknowledge my accomplishments. He engaged the services of a lawyer who specialized in issues involving child custody, and all of a sudden I was managing legal papers and attending court dates. I had the impression that I was living in a nightmare. For no other reason than the fact that I was running a successful online business, Travis was portraying me as some kind of unfit mother. The attorney for him was attempting to make the case that my work was in some way detrimental to Colton's health, and that I was putting my own financial interests ahead of those of my son. In addition to being utterly unfair, it was founded on antiquated and prejudiced beliefs on the labor that women do. I arranged for my own legal representation and got ready to fight back. Evidence that I was a good mother who just happened to have a non-traditional work was presented to me, along with verification of my salary and confirmation that I was making a major contribution to our family's financial situation. I wasn't going to give Travis the opportunity to use the legal system as a means of punishing me for being self-sufficient and profitable. The procedure for determining custody was extremely humiliating. A social worker who had been designated by the court arrived to do an interview with me, during which she asked me intrusive questions about my company, my relationship with Colton, and my priorities as a mother. She acted as if my work that I did online was in some way suspect or inappropriate, rather than acknowledging that it was legitimate business. During the examination, I made an effort to convey that I was serving as a role model for my son in terms of independence and achievement. I was demonstrating to him that women are capable of establishing enterprises and making a financial contribution to their families. The lesson I was trying to teach him was that the opinions and biases of other people should not restrict the things that you can do in life. The evaluator, on the other hand, appeared to be more interested in Travis's story about stability and traditional family values during the evaluation. Constantly, she inquired about my job schedule, my internet presence, and my ability to manage my time effectively. Instead of viewing my success in business as evidence of my capabilities and drive, she acted as if it were some kind of proof that I was a bad mother. While this was going on, my company was struggling due to the fact that there was so much stress and legal drama. It was through public records and local gossip that some of my subscribers became aware of the custody dispute, and as a result, I was experiencing a loss of income as a result of the negative attention. My brand and my capacity to expand my business were both being negatively impacted, which only served to make the issue more difficult overall. While the couple was separated, Travis began a relationship with a new person. There was a woman named Serena who worked at the school that Colton attended. He did, without a doubt, come across someone who was conventional and traditional. Someone who would never question his decision-making and decision-making authority. As the sole breadwinner in the family, a person who would never put his ego in jeopardy by being overly successful or independent by any means. Observing how fast Colton appeared to adjust to spending time with Travis and his new girlfriend was the most frustrating aspect of the interaction. When compared to her, I appeared to be the troublesome parent because she was acting out the part of the ideal stepmother who was all kind and helpful. In order to make me appear to be the bad person, it was quite manipulative to use the disorientation that a child had during the divorce. After the decision regarding custody was made, I was utterly heartbroken. Travis was granted primary custody of the child, and the judge made a statement regarding the child's stability and what was in the child's best interests. The fact that I was forced to pay child support felt like making an already difficult situation even worse. I was the successful business owner, yet here I was being treated like the irresponsible parent because of my prosperity. After the custody decision was made public, my company went through a thorough and extensive collapse. As a result of the negative exposure, both my reputation and my subscriber base were shattered when individuals began flagging my content as being inappropriate. The policies of the platform and the standards of the community became a significant concern. In a matter of weeks, all that I had constructed over the course of several months was gone. I was required to acquire a normal job for the first time in years, which meant working for someone else once more, requesting permission to take time off, and earning a tiny fraction of what I had been making on my own by working independently. In every conceivable manner, it felt like everything was going backwards.